Hi, I'm Chris Nesi from the House of EdTech Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Diane Namm. Diane is an author and filmmaker. Today we're talking about her book, Latkes and Lefse. Awesome talk, awesome focus, and it's going to make you hungry too, and want to say hi to your grandparents. Good stuff. Thanks for listening, and oh, by the way, it'd be so cool if you thought about helping out the podcast, because here are a couple ways you could. One of the ways is just tell a friend. You could share the links and say, hey, here's a podcast y'all listen to. That would be so cool. Another way would be to go to my website and leave a review and subscribe. And finally, how about click on the link on my website homepage to buy me a coffee. When you do this, you could donate $1 or $2 to help me address the costs associated with producing the podcast. That would be so cool. You're awesome. Enjoy the show.
The latkes portion is the fried potato pancake that is served generally at Hanukkah, fried in the oil that commemorates the 8 days of Hanukkah and the fact that the oil burns for those 8 days. Generally served with sour cream or applesauce or jelly or nothing at all. And as my grandchildren say, they're delicious.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Milletto. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. With Dr. Steve Milletto.
Diane Namm is an author and filmmaker with over 20 years of experience in creating stories that inspire, educate, and entertain audiences across different media platforms. She is the founder and owner of Lady of the Canyon, All Media, a production company that develops and produces original projects for film and television, such as Finding Hope, The Sacrifice, and Telemafia. Her passion is to bring classic and contemporary stories to life through engaging and interactive formats such as books, plays, and films. She has written and published over 65 children's books and young adult novels, as well as adapted and directed stage productions of works by Charles Dickens, Beatrix Potter, O. Henry, Mark Twain, and Walter Dean Myers. She has also written, directed, and produced award-winning films that explore social issues, human rights, and cultural diversity. She is a member of the Authors Guild, the Dramatists Guild, and Women in Film, and she is always looking for new ways to connect with readers and viewers. Diane, thanks so much for being on the show today, and say hi to everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks.
Well, glad that you're here, and let's start with this, because in a minute we're going to be talking about your book, Latkes and Lefse. And but before we get there, as a former children's book editor, could you share how books for children have evolved over the past few decades?
Sure, although I'm not an expert.
That's all right.
I've noticed that over time, the fact that females are role models, the fact that social issues are more accessible and more available and things that people talk more about, that's kind of entered the platform of children's books as well, which has been great. I think it's really expanded the subject matter, and it's also made more children see themselves in the stories that have been published.
Very cool. There's any number of books that are out there. One of the things that amazes me over the last bunch of years is how prolific the amount that's available if you can take advantage of it and make sure that it's there. It's just amazing how many are writing and producing. So tell me, what's the key to writing a child's book? So I've read a lot of books and worked with different authors who've written children's books, and I have my share of the ones I've read in the past. And then when my own kids were certain ages, reading to them, and then seeing the books they chose, and working with kids. I've been in public education for a long time, and one of the things that really stands out is that sometimes some books are a little too heavy with the sentences and words, or they mean well in what they've written, but it's kind of like a little too thick or dense. I don't know how else to say it. Any thoughts about this?
Well, I think I don't make comments about how other people do things, but what I try to do in each of the books, depending upon the premise for each story, is write something where the child can always see him or herself in the story, proudly see themselves in the story. And then for the adult, I try to make it so that on some level, it's interesting to the adult. They learn something or they find out something even about themselves or their child. So that if thankfully the child likes to read my book again and again and again and again, the adult isn't unhappy or hostile about the fact that they have to do that, because to them it's still as interesting the first time as it was, the gazillionth time. And so, depending on the story that you're telling, either you rely on the pictures, you rely on the words, and hopefully there's a really great blend of both, so that, again, a child of any age and an adult of any of any persuasion is interested in reading the story again and again.
I love that. That's and it's so obvious, even with children's books, because adults will want to, it's okay if their child says again, you can say, all right, we'll go through this one again. I can think of a couple different books that are like that over the time with the kids. That those don't, you're good with that, as opposed to, oh, not this one again.
Exactly. And I mean, we've all had that experience.
Yes, gotta love it. Yeah. So what do you think? I mean, you've written over 65 children's books. I mean, could you share what you feel is, do you have is there a key to good storytelling that you think needs to be there that helps? Because we've talked a little bit about, how the adults feel and how the kids feel and stuff like this. But when you're talking about storytelling, what do you think that key is?
For me, I was very much influenced in storytelling by fairy tales and mythology. Those were the stories I read really young. And I think so for me, the fact that there's always something that needs to be solved, some problem that needs to be overcome. And in general, it's best if the child is the one who does it. Because in that way, a child feels more powerful, having come up with a solution, and either outsmarting an adult or assisting an adult. It depends, as I said, on what the story is. But in Latkes and Lefse, I use the idea that a child could problem solve a restriction that seemed arbitrary. And in doing so, both follow the restriction and subvert the restriction at the same time by embracing a diversity in his own heritage. So that, to me, and actually all three of the main characters help in that plan. And so I think it's always great if there's a plan that unfolds while a child is reading or while an adult is reading to a child, that they're waiting to see what will happen.
That's cool. That's, as an adult, that's some of the things I like the best too. As a kid, I like that. And as an adult, it's like, yes, that's what I'm looking for. I like that stuff. Our focus today, like you talked about, is your book, Latkes and Lefse. Let's go ahead and give us a brief summation of Latkes and Lefse, and especially what they are. And then let's kind of go from there. I mean, and by the way, which really tastes better?
I don't know. It depends on which one you're eating, I think. If you're eating the Latkes, then they taste better. If you're eating the Lefse, then they taste better. I think they're both probably pretty good. The Latkes portion is the fried potato pancake that is served generally at Hanukkah, fried in the oil that commemorates the 8 days of Hanukkah and the fact that the oil burns for those 8 days. Generally served with sour cream or applesauce or jelly or nothing at all. And as my grandchildren say, they're delicious.
Nice.
But they also say that about Lefse. And Lefse is actually a Norwegian tradition. It's like a traditional flatbread. It's been served since the Vikings because when you make the dough, it really it stores well, and you can carry it with you, and you can bake it wherever you go. these days, it's served in my grandchildren's household as a dessert. So it's also made with potato and it's fried, but then it's rolled up very quickly. And then it's sprinkled with sugar and then decorated with butter. And I haven't had it myself, but I hear tell that is equally delicious to latkes.
Nice, very nice. Someone who has, I have on my dad's side, my grandparents came from Italy, brought over when they were young, and so growing up, and on my mom's side, they were Scottish, who immigrated to the U.S., and so we have different things that happen. We had a lot of stews on the Scottish side, and on the Italian side, we had a lot of homemade pasta, homemade bread, and one of my all-time favorite desserts called cannolis.
Mine too, as a matter of fact.
Nice. Now you got to. And the messier the better. You know, with a little powdered sugar all over your face.
It's true. Cannolis are the best.
Yes, you got that right. So, what inspired you to write this book?
To be honest, my daughter and I were speaking when she was collecting recipes for a multicultural cookbook at her children's school. And she said, I'd like your Latkes recipe, and I'm going to ask my mother-in-law for her Lefse recipe. And I said, Latkes and Lefse. That sounds like a title of a book.
It does.
And then I proceeded to write one. So it's not a true story, but it could have been. And basically, my grandchildren were the inspiration for the main characters. And since problem solving is something they do all the time, the problem I gave them was that the principal of their school said they're having a holiday feast, but since they all attend the same school as a family, they can only do one holiday and bring in only one type of food. And that didn't sit well with them because their favorite foods were both latkes and lefse.
Nice.
And so they figure out a way to make it work.
That's awesome. Silly adults, haven't they ever learned that when you say something so definitive like that there's going to be a reason why you shouldn't have?
Exactly.
Nice.
But it's a fictional principle. It's not the real principle.
Gotcha. All right. So, yeah. But I've had that experience too in reality. So, cool. I like that. I like that storyline. So, one of the things that, you're hitting on here is this whole idea of sharing, something that's traditional or something from, the background or from their heritage. Let's go into that just a little bit more. I mean, how can families of multiple faiths come together to celebrate the holidays?
I kind of used a quote from Mr. Rogers, from Fred Rogers.
Nice.
Who was the wisest of educators at an early time, I think. And he said, I just want to get the quote right, so I'm going to read it. We want to raise our children so that they can take a sense of pleasure in both their own heritage and the diversity of others. And so I think that if what we recognize about holidays and the fact that foods, childhood memories of celebrations and gatherings with family, and the fact that we like to spend time together doing that, and that's what makes up our childhood memories, is the very thing we all have in common. And yes, there are different reasons that we celebrate, and there are different ways in which we celebrate, and foods and times. But the universal human element is, this is how humans celebrate with each other. This is how we create our memories. And to respect that about all of us is, I think, a way to recognize we have more in common than we have things that divide us.
I love that because it's, one of the things, as a former high school principal, one of the things that someone long ago taught me is that when there's angst going on, and it coming into this meeting, whatever the meeting is that you're about to have with the family, the parents, whoever it is, is to try and get to a common ground, which should be the children.
Should be, yes.
Yes. And if you can get back to there, then you can usually put aside the angst so you can get to whatever a possible common solution is to whatever the problem.
Sure.
And I think a lot of times that's school, but I think a lot of times, family issues and all kinds of stuff. That's one of the. It's like they forget about the children part.
Right. I mean, that's the world. The world is that we should all be looking for ways in which we can both respect each other and live together, because we all inhabit this earth, and that's that's the bottom line. We don't have any place else to go, at least not at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And who knows? Maybe AI will be taking over anyway. Never mind. Just had to throw that.
Gosh, I hope not.
Yeah. Neither do I. I really hope it doesn't either. All right. So, let's talk a little bit about this. I mean, you start talking about the whole idea with mixed heritages, and can you talk about how a child of parents with mixed heritages might choose, what to identify with or what to embrace? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, as I said originally with Mr. Rogers' quote, I think that you can both respect the fact that your family may come from mixed heritages and try to figure out a way to combine them. In Latkes and Lefse, the main characters, all three of them, figure out a way. They rack their brains, and then they use the internet, and then they come up with the perfect way of combining their heritages so that they can satisfy this restriction of bringing only one food and celebrate only one holiday. That's not as easy to do in every heritage, and it's not as possible to come up with a made-up holiday, whereas they found an actual holiday that combines their heritages. But my daughter came up with a really good plan, which is she has this seasonal rotation of books that are holiday themed or specifically geared to the season, depending upon what month it is. And so the kids don't get tired of reading those books or having those books read to them, because they only get to see them, 1 month a year.
Nice.
So in the course of that month, if there are holidays that fall through it, then she has books that pertain to those holidays, even though they're not, necessarily the holidays we celebrate. So there's an appreciation for all types of holidays, not just your own, and not just the few that you may celebrate in your own family, whether it's a single heritage or a multi-heritage family. And I think that way of sort of looking at each month as a celebration of something, and the stories that tell about those somethings is a way of bringing a lot of diversity into your experience and creating an appreciation and a respect. And again, stressing the commonality or the universality of needing to gather community in order to be able to celebrate something.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. It's having. As a kid, I hung out with both my grandfathers. They lived in different parts of the country, and so when we visited the one we lived down the street from for a while, but I was both their buddies. All right. Now, in my case, my grandmothers were the rule makers and the rule enforcers. Okay, so I wasn't hanging out with them. I was hanging out with the rule breakers, which were their husbands. And sometimes look back on it and I think, were they using me as an excuse? But I don't.
I think they were probably using you for protection.
Yeah, probably, yes. And it was quite fun because I hung out with them, and they introduced me to their friends and took me on little journeys and stuff like this, and their little adventures, and it was really quite amazing. And my in the case of my Italian grandparents, they would actually, if they got into a little battle, they would switch to Italian when they realized I was standing right there. But but my point is not that. It was, so one of the things that both my grandmothers did quite a bit was prepare meals and have specialties that they cooked and prepared and I mean, the house smelling like bread was just like, oh my gosh. And, I have this uncle today who still makes all this type of stuff. And I love visiting him because it's like, it's just him in the house, but it's like, all right, you made some bread today, didn't you? Or you made whatever. And
Sure.
what a cool thing. Can you talk a little bit about, when we talk about family, kind of the importance that family can play in just passing on what they do and what they did and what their family heritage is all about. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I mean, as you said, you can smell your childhood when you walk into your uncle's house because he's making things from your childhood that signified a celebration and a coming together with your family. And I mean, I think that's just who human beings are. And so in my book, I have the recipe for latkes in the front pages, and I have the recipe for lefse, which you can serve more as a dessert at the end of the book. And I just think that knowing those recipes, I put them in the book so that not only are they in the cookbook for the kids' school, but now everybody can have them. And so if you're interested in developing new foods to celebrate things with, this is my gift to the world and to my own grandchildren. And I think that, of course, the memories of my grandmother cooking and my husband's grandmother cooking, because I knew him back then, and the kids watching us cook now is just something, again, that being human is what you do. You cook for everyone. We all love food. We all love the smell of food. We all love what it means. Everyone knows that when you're roasting a turkey, that means Thanksgiving, colonial aspects notwithstanding. And so, there's just an association of smells and tastes and fun and love that goes with holidays. And that's what we all do. It's universal.
And it's so magical because it's like even, and especially from a kid's point of view, because a lot of times you don't know what the dynamics of the adults that's going on. But
Sure.
Remember I hung out with my grandfathers, right? And so one of the things that would always happen was there were these uncles. I have some wonderful stories about some goofy uncles and that I loved hanging out with too. Like I had one who, when my mom's sister, husband, there we go. All right. And he taught when her sister's, she had her first child, when the child got old enough. So at Thanksgiving and Christmas time, when he's coming to visit with, his wife and the child, and he's teaching his sister's child, his sister-in-law's child, that the anything round is a Frisbee. All right. And I have these awesome memories because one Thanksgiving at the dinner table, the child remembered all this and sees the plate with the green beans on it. He's flinging plates, Frisbee.
Right.
Yeah, that was that goofy uncle, or he never knew what he was going to come up with. And there's just any number of things. One of the things that your book makes me think about is that it's just, if you could just, some families, they just put aside some of the problems and just hang out with each other, because that's some of the coolest stuff when, you just never know what's going to come about. I had the one grandfather who showed me with my walkie-talkie that I could, now, obviously this is the type of technology that existed in the day,
Right.
but there was a TV antenna that was attached to the side of the roof. And came all the way down the ground. It was a big triangle type thing, and I can share another about that in just a minute, because he and I were constantly getting in trouble. Both my grandfathers had this way of getting in trouble, but he showed me that.
Sounds like you should write a book about that.
I probably should. Yes, if you took out the antenna on the walkie-talkie and you touched it to the part where the cables from the TV coming from it inside the house, attached to it. You just touched it on there. You could make your voice come across the TV set.
Really?
Yes. And
that's awesome.
It was awesome. It was awesome. And it was one of those things where, basically went something like this: Chuck, stop teaching him how to do stuff like that. Dinner's ready. Cause then that whole antenna, remember I told you, look, it was like a ladder. He showed me how he uses it to climb up on the roof. And so the two of us would climb up on the roof. And my other grandfather, it's one of those things that you go out and you go visit people and you go do things, and you just never knew when we were going to be, where the trip was going to take us. But it took us to all these different little, all these cronies that were all over the place. And you get, and that was cool because all of them were these, none of them were tall. So all of them were short Italian guys, and they're sitting around talking about, everything from, all right, so, so-and-so passed away, so that means there's two more coming, and it all happens in threes.
I don't know. It sounds to me like Adventures with My Grandpa and whatever else you may have called the other grandpa.
Oh, they're both
sounds
grandpa.
Adventures with My Grandpa sounds like a book to me.
I think you're right. You may just talk me into that. I think what's sad is when families are missing some of that type of stuff, or that the time doesn't exist to do that, or they don't make the time to do that, and or things happen too soon. And that's what your book makes me think of, is all the cool things. Because I never was real fond of trying to cook, and I wish I had been, because my dad was a heck of a cook and made sauces that would take him a couple days to perfect and whatever, and then he'd freeze a bunch of it. But this is just cool stuff, and I think that it kind of takes me back. I'm not sponsored by Coca-Cola, but a long time ago in the 70s, they had one of the coolest commercials where they used the song "Like to Buy the World a Coke."
Like to teach the world to sing.
There it is. There it is. Yeah, and
in perfect harmony.
There you go.
I guess that influenced me too, because I wish the world would learn to sing in harmony too.
And that's where I was going with that. That's exactly it. That's what you're talking about. And sometimes it's just all that good stuff that when families can share with each other, just the things that the good times and all that stuff. They, I just can't say enough about that. I think it's just so cool. Do you have a hope or a message that you're hoping people take away that I may have already revealed? But
I think I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. Is the title for this episode?
I think you're right. It's such a good feel good sort of thing, because with all the families have their own issues, and they come out, and everything from divorces to someone not talking to somebody forever and that sort of stuff. Because lo and behold, I got those going on in my world and in my family's world, and it's you try and figure out how to come back together and remember all that good stuff. So cool stuff. Yeah, I love it. So, do you have a favorite grandparent story?
Do I have a favorite grandparent
or relative, uncle, aunt, grandmother, something connecting you with?
My childhood was pretty much filled with family visits because, you said your grandfather lived a few blocks away. Well, my mother's parents lived a few blocks away all my life because they always helped to take care of us, because my mother was working full time as well as my father. My father's parents weren't alive when I was growing up, but he had 7 brothers and a sister.
Nice.
So they too lived within a few, not all of them, but a lot of them lived within a few blocks of where we were. So the weekends were spent with my grandparents on Saturdays. And then on Sundays, my father would take my sister and me to my uncle's house, where he had a ping pong table, and so everybody gravitated to his house. And we spent all day Sundays having family ping pong tournaments. And we were the youngest of all of the nieces and nephews who were there. And so it was fairly competitive. So I learned how to play ping pong pretty well.
Nice.
And and my aunt, who was the female representative of the family, was always cooking. She made all sorts of things that, were like the thing I waited to have on Sundays because she was such a good cook. So I think, like everybody, there's just a centering around the person who makes the food and the person who has something fun to do. And then your family is just all part of whatever that life, whatever that household is providing. And I think we should all have more of that. I know that everybody kind of has moved away from being near extended family because we all have busy lives and we all have places to be and careers to follow. But I think it's worthwhile trying to make room in your life, either on vacations or as part of a regular visitation, to have that extended family be there, because then you do build memories. And not only do you build memories, but you build repertoire of skills like ping pong and foods like latkes.
I love that. That's awesome. You get good stuff. I mean, because now you got me thinking about all kinds of goofy things that if it hadn't been for hanging out, and I'm glad my own children have been able to, because my parents passed away long before they have no memories of them, but
Right.
My wife's parents, on the other hand, they've been awesome with them, and every year you went to grandma's house type thing, and celebrated there, and all the good stuff that comes with that, and so they have all these great stories between the two of them, and I think that's just a cool thing, and I wish that more people could experience those. Take time out and just there's every.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of anger and anxiety and fear are the sorts of things that families and that we as human beings in our communities were meant to be, remedied from or saved from, because we have those people to rely on. And I think that a lot of the people who spend most of their time being angry don't have that kind of support system and don't have the foundation where love and community and experiences and time was given and things like that. And I wish that weren't so.
Oh, I hear that. Boy, do I hear that. That's so much so. Diane, we're getting ready to wrap up, but before we go, if someone wanted to follow up and connect with you and learn more, where would you send them?
I have a bunch of websites. I do have a Facebook page, although I admittedly don't check it that much. But I do have a LinkedIn profile, and I do communicate with people sometimes that way. You can also write to me at dnamm, Namm, at ladyofthecanyon.com, which is my production company website. And then you can sort of, if you wanted to just order the books, you can order them from Amazon or pick them up at Barnes & Noble or go to latkesandlefse.com. So I'm reachable all of those ways.
Very nice. I'll make sure that information is in the show notes so it makes it easy for people to go find you. And I got two last questions that I like to ask my guests, and they're just general questions. And the first one goes like this. How do you keep going when so much is going on that you may want to quit? You may want to say, I'm done.
That's a great question. And I'm not sure that I know a complete answer. My father used to say when people called him stubborn, he's not stubborn, he's just persistent.
Nice.
And I feel that he has genetically transmitted that to me, and that persistence is just my nature. And so I keep writing because that's just the only thing I can do. If I was good at numbers, I would have been something in the math field, but I'm not. So this is what I do. And so on any given day, I'll write something because it makes me feel better. And generally, it's not something that ever sees the light of day, but it's something that I was thinking about or that I think that I could remedy. And so I'll just write it down.
That's cool. I like that. Last question. Do you have a teacher in your past who made a difference in your life? If so, who was it? And what would you say if given the chance to say thank you?
You know, I've thought about that. And I mean, there were certainly, from the beginning and the end of the spectrum, two people who I think really made a difference. My first grade teacher was Mrs. Sitzman. She has long since left this world, but she was the most energetic and enthusiastic and supportive person that I had ever encountered in my short little time in school.
Nice.
And she impacted not just me, but also my mother, because she inspired my mother to return to her education and then get to a point where she got her master's and then become part of the school system as well. So I'd say Mrs. Sitzman was my first impactful teacher. And then when I was at the University of Michigan getting my master's in English, the professor that mattered the most to me, because he was also my advisor, he's also not with us any further, but his name was James Gindon. And he was just a magnificent intelligence that was so inspiring to listen to. He had this really great speaking voice, and he had such insight and so much to add to the literature that we studied, that I just thought to myself, I've never even really thought about these different elements that he brought to light just as a very matter-of-fact sort of thing. So I think that I was just lucky enough to meet him at the end of my schooling and Mrs. Sitzman at the beginning of my schooling. And I guess I muddled through everywhere else in between.
That's cool. That's cool. Thanks for sharing those. I think it's neat when you ask that question. It does make people think, especially sometimes they go, I got to decide here, you know, so it's nice to hear about several of them, especially, you know, because I
never decide. I always include.
Nice. I like that. That's so cool. That's so cool. Diane, thank you so much for sharing your book, Latkes and Lefse. By the way, I'm now very hungry.
Well, if you have the book, the recipes are at your fingertips.
Very nice. Very nice. So I will be trying. I had Latkes before. I'm going to have Lefse. So this has been awesome. I mean, you got me thinking about family and all the good stuff right there, and how we could all, you know, teach each other to share a smile or two, and maybe sing a song or two as well, and eat some good and traditional foods. And eat together. You got that right. Wish you the best in all you do.
I wish you too, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Take care. Bye.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.